Do the Rumble Rock.
Can you please do the end? He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman.
Why are you whispering?
I hit the microphone. People can hear. Also, nobody's here yet, so we don't need to worry about it.
Should we just sit here and wait and watch the count?
No,
Or are you going to go post this somewhere else, right?
I think we're
That'd
just.
make good
We got 9 now.
Oh,
All
9.
right.
Wow, that's a big jump.
You need to lock in.
No, the ratings went up when I started talking. That's huge.
That is one way of thinking about it. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This is Mind Your Banners live from Michigan 70, Indiana 67. Let's talk about the game.
Assembly Hall in
Indiana. And then we will talk about everything else. Briefly, the game. I think for Indiana, I don't say like a familiar script, but it just feels like just like kind of this persistent inconsistency we've seen from Indiana, where there will be stretches when this team, kind of finds something and puts together 10, 12 really impressive minutes. Then there will be stretches where you just feel like they just lose kind of all touch with the game. This wasn't quite Wisconsin, but Michigan just sort of like steadily and efficiently just sort of pulled away from Indiana. Indiana spends most of the second half coming back. They get it tied. They never lead. They actually never led in this game, and they ultimately can't. They had like 2 or 3 trips maybe to take a lead. I think over like there was a stretch where they were down like 1 or 2 points, so they could have taken the lead.
They only had the one chance to take the lead. Then they had a couple chances.
To tie. Well, I think they had.
They might have had 2 chances to take the lead, but it was a handful.
It was they basically just kind of couldn't find the consistency, and ultimately, I mean, they didn't play terribly. Michigan's a good team, but they just didn't do enough. Like it's kind of been the story of this game, this team this season.
Damning with faint praise. They didn't play terribly.
Well, that's good, but again, that feels like just kind of the story of this season.
Well, you could see what the ceiling could have been if they put it together, right? Like they could play with anybody at any time, but they're just not a good team.
That just feels like what it's been all year.
That's the thing. I think the 2 notable things, sort of one notable thing about this game was that the most success that they had was a lineup without their 2 prize transfers on the floor. Miles Rice did not play in the second half. I was replaced in the starting lineup by Trey Callaway. Omar Ballo, they threw a careless pass at the less than 90 seconds in. He goes out. He went out for about 12 minutes. Checked back in because Malik Renew, who's still kind of not exactly 100%, played 30 minutes tonight, but he played 14 straight minutes on the floor, so they had to give him a rest. I think over the last 2 games, Ballo has looked completely disinterested, and I thought that was again tonight. And Mike Woodson tried to talk to him about the turnover. He sort of just walked away and shook his head. And he couched kind of why he went with the second half lineup the way he did was he wanted seniors. Galloway, Leal, Goody were all on the floor at the same time, kind of leaning on them. I just find it interesting that and Rice has been sort of really up and down, more down than up, and sort of this during this losing streak. And it's been, it's increasingly pronounced that last year's Pac-12 freshman year cannot give them anything positive. I mean, 1 of 6 tonight, 1 turnover. And if you kind of want to look for reasons why this team is the way, struggling, those were the guys that were supposed to lead you to sort of the
well, yeah, no, I think that's fair to a certain point. I think I would go to something even more fundamental, which is a question that our colleague Todd Golden asked Mike Woodson, but not the Florida coach, but the Indiana sports writer Todd Golden asked Mike Woodson post game, which was he pointed out you have these stretches in Indiana. He meant Mike Woodson, he meant Indiana. These stretches in games where Indiana finds a lineup that works. And so Mike Woodson just kind of rides it, which has very much always been his MO. He's always said, especially in second halves of games, he finds a lineup and he rides what he calls the hot hand. But Todd's point in his question, and Woodson, I would not say really he didn't ignore it, but I don't think he really engaged with it that heavily. Todd's point I thought was valid, which is it's kind of a different lineup most of the time. And you bring up Rice and Ballo tonight, but there have been times in the last month when Ballo has carried this team and Indiana's still not been able to do enough with that, or when Rice has had a good game, but maybe Trey Galloway doesn't really get going.
But
Mackenzie Mbako has been scoring more consistently. I understand what you're saying about that, but I'm talking about we keep telling this story in different ways. Indiana's lost 5 in a row. They've lost, 7 of 8 now. And one of the consistent issues is it's like Indiana does not have something that it can go to within its rotations, within its lineups, within just the structure of the way the team is built and put on the floor. And you can say, hey, we need 5 good minutes right now. what do we go to? Who do we go to? If it's somebody else every night, you start to feel like there's just not a level of consistency to rely on.
But I would say I think there's a caveat to that because the reason you go away from Trey Galloway earlier this season is he's in a shooting slump. Mackenzie Mbako offensively struggles, and so I think those are sort of different. Like what is wrong with Miles Rice right now that he can't sort of get. I like struggles to run the offense, and it's not just like struggles. Like there's reasons you go away from Luke Goody in a game, earlier in the year because he's having troubles with his 3-point shot. You're kind of going for the hot hand. I think what's different recently, with Rice especially, there's not really he can't find his game, but he's not really doing anything particularly well. And
but he's good again. I mean, he's good. I pulled up his numbers. He's good in the Maryland game. Then nothing against Purdue. He's probably one of the 1 or 2 players.
He had one the first in the second half. He did not all that production was in the first half.
But like it at least felt he was one of the few players that at least felt like was plugged into the game at times against Wisconsin, and then again tonight. I just and if we can do Ballo too, because again, I know that you and I have had differences of opinion on Ballo, but I can take you back to a stretch where Ballo scored in double figures in 9 straight games, and that included I want to say 5 or 6 double doubles. I just it. Listen, I'm not disputing that, especially this afternoon, those two were a big part of kind of Indiana not being able to find what it needed to. I just think the bigger question here, and I was banging this drum back in November that the potential strength for Indiana was you had so many different options and so many different weapons that, on any given night, this guy could fill in for that guy. This guy could have an off night because that guy could, pick up the slack. But I also said, especially as the season wore on, I said, listen, the danger of teams like that is sometimes you don't know what to count on because you don't have those pillars that you just, like last year when it's just like, hey, everything for Indiana starts with Trey Galloway and Kalel Ware, and then you branch out from there. When Indiana kind of found something there in February and March, it just feels like this team is if the solution is different to frankly some of the same problems every single night, then you just get these inconsistent performances that lead to the results that we see, I think.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point to sort of then look to the future. I think that there were signs, they did fight back. The seniors did show, quite a bit of fight. And 2 of those guys have been here a long time. And
I thought Anthony Leo played really well. They asked him to guard Danny Wolf.
And he played his butt off, and he was banging in there in the post, even against some of the one time he got stuck against Golden, and he was trying. He's really holding his ground. And I think you give those players credit, but I do think there are some warning signs. I thought Ballo, like I said, I was sort of hesitant to criticize his effort sort of stuff earlier on the season when they were kind of trying to stretch out his minutes because he hadn't been used to sort of the workload that they had given him. I think the last 2 games are, warning signs are flashing, and I think that going forward, what do you do now with Rice? Was he out for didn't say anything injury related in the post-game press conference? You kind of to not play in the second half. And now, sort of how these lineups looks here going forward, who's going to buy in?
And he's been changing lineups up more a little bit lately.
With the second half,
especially second halves. I think he changed Did Anthony Leal start at Wisconsin? I think Galloway started at Wisconsin, didn't he?
Yeah, in the second half.
Yeah, and then again, it just sort of feels. And Woodson said I've done a terrible job putting these players basically in positions to succeed. Is essentially what he said. The words "I've done a terrible job" were what led the quote. I don't have the rest of it in front of me, but. No, I just, I think the great gamble with this team was always kind of this idea that hey, there's just going to be so much talent that there will always be a solution somewhere on the floor.
Can't call it in play. He wasn't on injury report, did not.
This was his first game back in at least uniform, or did he warm up?
I think he warmed up against Wisconsin.
No, he didn't. He was in straight clothes. He wasn't with the team against Purdue because he was sick. He was back with the team at Wisconsin, but he did not dress. He was just with the team. It feels like this team just kind of has gotten to a place, and it's February 8th. And I remember you saying in November, okay, but this might not work. And I said, and I acknowledged that. And I said, if we're still having these conversations about consistency and roles and how all this is just constantly in flux in January and February, that's a problem. And that's where, that to me was always, and we can stop talking about this team and talk about, I know we did a long podcast about it yesterday too, but just talk about the atmosphere today in a minute. But that to me was always the danger of this team specifically was, I think that the phrase I used a few weeks ago was, sometimes when you try to be a jack of all trades, you wind up a master of none. And I think Indiana's in a place where it's like game to game, some games are better with turnovers. Some games that, today they made more threes than Michigan. They were great defensively in the second half, but they were really bad defensively in the first half.
Can I hear Mark comment about Khalil, where, one difference that this season, Woodson did find something, and I don't know whether it was in like engaging with Ware, but or the way that it's he got something more out of Ware than he showed in the past and unlocked something in Ware. And, he said, when I think his pitch to a lot of these guys is like, look, I'm going to get you to the league. I'm going to help you. And he's not been able to find, whether it's relating on a personal level or finding the right basketball roles with any of the transfers they brought in, really.
Other than Goody.
Goody's been just kind of steady, done what he was,
very
hasn't elevated to another level. But I'm saying, like, the guys that, had NBA aspirations for, immediate NBA aspirations, like Rice and Valo, did not find that like he found that with Ware, because, Ware obviously drafted in the first round and now sort of taken off, but has not been able to do that. And that's sort of where the season sort of failed, where the transfers have not given them the boost that, that was going to be the core of the team, essentially. That was the kind of the envision, and everybody else was role players. And, now it just didn't work.
We don't have to talk about like the enormous picture, because again, we did a lot of that
big picture, but not enormous
picture. We did that a lot on Friday night. Go back and listen to that podcast. I thought we covered a lot of good ground there. But I've seen some weird atmospheres in this building. Some good. Like when Bob Knight comes back for the first time. There's some weird ones. Like I remember Kelvin Sampson getting a standing ovation, walking off the floor after beating Purdue, and then he's fired. That's on Tuesday. He's fired on Thursday night. There have been, some other ones. I thought Assembly Hall really didn't know how to feel today.
I just thought it was notable for not being notable. Like
there was no like
Dusty May
like
incident, like over love. Like cheering him every time he did something.
And the crowd really got into it in the second half.
They cheered the team at the end of the first half, rightfully so. They were down by 16. Were not very good, but in the second half, it wasn't like they were. They got back into it. They made it really tough on Michigan. Michigan had, I think, 3 different stretches without field goals for 4 minutes. So they were getting in Michigan's head. Michigan was not. 0 for 9 in the second half from 3-point range.
I think Michigan missed like its last 13.
I think it was 4 in the first half, so 13.
Yeah.
So 13 threes, and a lot of that, the crowd did impact that. But to me, it wasn't notable at all. They gave Woodson an okay ovation.
We wondered if there would be some kind of incident, and in any kind of direction.
You're not a wrestling guy, though, are you?
Not. I'm.
So it's wrestling. The WWE is famous for when they have WrestleMania, they have Monday Night Raw in the same city usually, and that's sort of the crowd that's like the in crowd, like the crowd that knows wrestling is plugged in, and they have a habit of like taking over and derailing shows with random chants, not cheering their. And so like I think that's what you're talking about. Like you don't really know what to expect from that crowd.
Of crowd.
And so that's sort of what you were like. What are they going to do? But they didn't do anything.
Yeah, that was the thing. I think everyone showed up today
ready to cheer this team on.
Well, I think everyone showed up today wondering if there would be something unusual, and ultimately there wasn't. And it just sort of felt like, and I think this is kind of what I'm going to write a little bit post game. It just sort of felt like by the end, everyone was like, all right, fine, let's just move on. That, you wondered if there would be something good or bad related to Mike Woodson after Friday's announcement, whether there would be something good or bad related to Dusty May, what would happen. Certainly even when Indiana goes down 18, it was not remotely the atmosphere that was in here against Illinois. No. Like not even close to that. And now that game was a little bit different. Like Illinois kind of blitzed Indiana. Michigan just sort of steadily They
had a 16-1 run where you kind of pointed out that Woodson didn't call a timeout.
Yeah, but like even that,
they got restless more than
it didn't happen in like 2.5 minutes. It was like a very sort of steady thing. So it was a little bit more like a rock rolling down a mountain than having one dropped on you. But
so now as we go, they've lost five in a row.
5 in a row. This is their 5th 5-game losing streak in Big Ten play since 2017.
And they haven't lost 6 in a row in a regular season since 18-19. We talked about this before season. And they've won 6 of 7 or 7 of 8.
7 of 8.
7 of 8. If they now Michigan State up next, it'll be a tough game as they blitzed Oregon in the second half. If they don't get a win here soon,
who do you think was watching that game?
No, but if they don't get a win here, will the atmospheres get uglier here? Like, I mean,
I-
like, you know, like, what is your outlook kind of for this
I
team
don't.
if they
I don't
continue to
think so.
struggle?
Just because, and again, like the phrase I come back to is it was almost like Assembly Hall was just ready to move on. But
Like, do you think they're now good
that-
and just like this is we all got
because everyone, you know, that there's no question about what's next, and there's no real
they're not going to
target.
feel bad for the kids that are involved.
Yeah,
more
there's
so
no-
than try to make a point.
There's
that
no
they're
target
unhappy.
for the frustration. It's just sort of like, well, you know, at a certain point soon, the season will end. And that's when something new will begin. I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, and obviously, you know, something could happen like off the court, or someone could say something, or there could be, you know, some kind of incident in a game or something that could change that in the moment. But I think in the wider sense, like I said, I just, you know, I think you put it well when you said it was what was strange about the game was that it ultimately wound up not being strange, and everyone seemingly just kind of like was on edge waiting for it to be. And that almost kind of made it weird in its own way that everyone was just sort of sitting there kind of gripping their seat wondering what now, and then the answer was, well, nothing really. This team just kind of, you know, dug itself too deep a hole, as we talked about, some inconsistent performances, not quite good enough to get over the hump, and you know, it loses 5 in a row. But like I just felt like the building moved on today. And I'm not saying they won't get into it. You know, if Indiana's in a tight game with Purdue here, they'll cheer for wins. Yeah. But like there was a conscious uncoupling from the idea that what is out there right now is something that anybody should or needs to invest in long term.
And we want to talk just briefly about Woodson's post-game press conference. We should say that he did not address sort of this last week his decisions to step down, or what kind of precipitated that.
I thought we got him to. I'm not acting like it was, you know, some you know 11th order, you know, interrogation. I thought we got him to pick at the edges of it a little bit, like he talked about the Illinois
it's hard to ignore because you were looking at the body of the work, and that's kind of what led
and
like
to all it was you know, it was clear from one of his answers that like the Illinois game, you know, probably kind of, at least in his estimation, did something to his team through the course of the season.
Well, and I think he admitted it's weighed sort of whether it's the speculation over his job or the frustration from the fans about the sort of inconsistencies, that it has weighed on the players. I mean, he said flat out that they've not been the same, you know, since January, and you know, it's been bad, and you know, and he's felt bad for them. He didn't make them available after the game, or Indiana didn't make them available after the game to the media. So that was one thing he said that was sort of notable. But you know, we will see, I guess, on the broadcast as well, if any of you weren't here watching it, that they said he talked, you know, to CBS pregame and, you know, articulated some of his reasoning, but they asked him not to share. So
he asked them.
Yes.
He asked them not to share.
Yes. And so, you know, we kind of wait to see if he'll address it at some point. You know, nothing scheduled from Indiana right now, but that's sort of kind of where we're at with the, you know, how he addressed things. Like you said, talking generally about sort of the poor performance, which kind of is part of it, but like didn't address it head on.
No, he didn't. And he certainly didn't address like kind of his own personal process and what led him to that place of feeling like maybe he should be stepping aside, or at least, you know, I mean, the way it was certainly framed from Indiana was that he came to Scott Dolson.
Correct.
Obviously, these things there can always be sort of layers to that, and I don't want to speculate, but the point is
I do think it's notable
what got him to a place where he said, even just in his own mind, he thought the right thing here for me, for my team is,
or for him personally.
Yeah.
But I do think it is fair to say sometimes you see these statements and there's quotes from, you know, your athletic director, your coach, and others, your president, whatever. This was just a straight statement from Scott Dolson, and it didn't have his name on, you know, like he didn't add any quotes or add any perspective. So I think it's fair to wonder like what he has to say about it. And you know, there was speculation that he was going to retire. You know, that was some of the reports, but that word was not used. So
no, it has not been. I think that's important.
And so like
not been used in anything official.
You know, I think it's a fair question. Is this, you know, does he want to get back into coaching? And those are things that, you know, we'll have to address down the line.
We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for watching. For anybody who's been watching live, thank you all for listening. Everyone who listens, one more time: number 22, Michigan 70, Indiana 67. Hoosiers are 14-10, 5-8 in Big Ten play. They're at Michigan State Tuesday night, and then UCLA home on Friday. That's the next week for this team. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman for the Herald Times and the Star. Thank you so much for listening and watching. We'll talk to you soon.